joining us. After the introductions, I'll now hand it over to Mr. Umesh to set the context for this session and then to lead the discussion. Over to you, Mr. Umesh. Thank you.
So, good afternoon and welcome to the session. And I thank DSI for organization this complex, challenging, bit confusing, but so many items in this subject which has been chosen to set the context. So, hybrid infra, the way it is being practiced, defined is you have a DC, you are in a process of going to cloud or in the middle of cloud deployment. So then comes another challenge that you have to be complying with so many regulatory requirements and legal and regulatory requirements. It could be GDPR, then it could be PCI DSS if you are doing credit card processing. Then certain also came in with some direction. So if you put everything together and then little more complexity into this is that you choose the technology to automate and then demonstrate. So that is the whole subject. So if you tie everything into one canvas, so it raises many challenges, but at the same time it give I would say a tough time to all strategic thinkers. So in with the given context, so my first question goes to Mr. Shiv Kumar Pandey. So what are your views when you try to achieve two different targets? The target number one is in the hybrid infrastructure you have to meet compliance which is ever changing. Second is you have to ensure that the security itself is ensured, demonstrated.
So good afternoon everyone. So I will bifurcate this into the two part. One is the challenges for the technology and security related challenges when you are coming for the hybrid model or even the cloud adoption also. And the second is the regulatory challenges. So if you talk about, company like us where you have a legacy system from more, long days which is happening, and now you're talking about everything has to be migrated on the Hyper-V kind of, or maybe a kind of, platform which we call as a cloud platform. So your application has to be built in such a way that they are, compatible with the cloud environment, or whether it is a private cloud and the public cloud, it should be, compatible. That's the major challenges. And the cloud adoption, other challenges is like in the visibility is to be required. Whether it is SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, every stage, how much, the control and your visibility is there, that's become very challenges, especially when you're talking about doing the VAPT or even doing the audit per se on, so for the cloud environment, it's become, you should be very clear on the set. If you talk about, the hybrid from, your on premises or even on your cloud, your cyber security policies or your information security policy should be in your control. That and deploying those controls on the centralized platform is also a challenge, as how you to be configured in a hybrid environment and the cloud environment. Coming to the regulatory challenges, is like in your data should be low, Indian geographic location or country geographic location, then how you will cater. Nowadays, most of the service provider, they are saying, they are giving a self declaration, your data is within the country job, but how you will, verify that your data is in Indian geographic location or not, that's also become a challenge. And something, as I said, from regulatory point of view, like, regulator is saying that you should be a periodic audit, especially, in SaaS area, it is a gray area, how you do the challenges. Now, no service provider in India today is even, especially cloud service provider, they are not allowing even do the, complete, cyber security audits, even your premises, even remotely also. And similarly doing a VAPT also. So these are the major challenges when you talk about hybrid technology and, regulatory point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Shiv. My next follow-up question goes to Mr. Sumit. So, Mr. Sumit, striking a balance is something which come as a challenge to all of us as in a leader. So there is a compliance requirement which is ever changing, and rather is it getting added. And second is maintaining an optimum security, and then come your budget constraints. So given this scenario, can you share what you see this as a challenge and how you are trying to mitigate this challenge or handle the challenges?
Uh, Thanks. So I think as part of my role, managing not just APEC, I think I'm looking at global, and every regulator comes with a slightly different requirement. So they are all learning from each other. So you start with X, then X.1, X.2. So us as a financial institution that I work for, it's a you know ever what should I say, evolving headache that we need to constantly maintain our systems, but at the same time being able to demonstrate to the regulator when they come knocking, either as an inspection or queries, that how do we meet these requirements. There are a number of aspects. A is that your policy framework has to be evolving so that you can cater to the needs of these regulatory requirements. If your policies are not keeping up to the regulatory requirements, then you will not be able to demonstrate compliance. It's quite important that the policy framework is kept up to date. Secondly, you cannot rest on your laurels, right? So once you have implemented a strong control framework, does not mean that it will never change. The control framework has to be evolving as well, and I think you will keep me hearing saying evolving. That's part of the game, right? We cannot just sit and relax. So your control framework has to be constantly up to date. Now, if you are implementing best practices, then you can be rest assured that your controls will be in line with the regulatory requirement. Your security posture framework will be in good shape to ensure that whether external auditor comes, whether internal auditor comes, inspections, you can demonstrate that your design and operating effectiveness is up to the scratch. And finally, what is most important is data-driven framework that helps you, and the topic which we're talking about is the continuous compliance. So unless you as an organization are not data-driven, you cannot draw insight from the data. It will be extremely difficult for you to be able to sleep peacefully for us as cybersecurity professional or risk professionals, that our boundaries, whether external, internal, both from an external threat perspective as well as from an insider threat perspective, are adequately protected. Some of these data-driven frameworks can be persona-based. So there are a lot of tools and products that are now available in the market. I think the most important aspect, and I think somebody told me today, as Abdul Kalam said, is that if you give me a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes on understanding the problem and coming up with how I can attack it, and I would spend 5 minutes to figuring out a solution. The same way, I think creating these persona-based dashboards and putting the insight into these dashboards, I think it's quite important, because somebody who's at a CEO level would like to see only few certain aspects. But as the information then gets drilled down deeper, be it a cyber CIS, CISO professional, or be it risk professional, each of them are looking at the problem with a different lens. Building these persona-based compliance framework or data-driven framework will help you to be on top of your game, to be able to identify the problem more in a proactive way rather than in a reactive way.
Thank you, Sumit. And the key word which I have chosen from your detailed description is, one is the data-driven model. So that means data classification at the beginning, that what is my crown jewel and whether they are really critical for me to spend, because that is what we started the balancing with the budget and all that. Second pointer which I am picking from you is continuously updating the policy and control framework, right? So on this, I am building a question for Mr. Subbu. Consider all these three, and now I am adding one more dimension, is training and keeping your employee motivated, because security is not we people as a security leads responsibility. It is everyone's plays a role, right? How you stitch this canvas, the three input from Sumit, and I am adding forth is a training or continuous training to the people. Because if you change the policy, what are the changes, whether people have been trained? So over to you.
Thanks, Umesh, and very interesting points actually brought in by Mr. Pandey and Sumit. So I would actually start off with what Mr. Pandey said, which is visibility. Now, before we get down to enforcing any type of compliance, like, okay, this device is supposed to be compliant, this device needs to be healthy, it needs to follow ABC policies, it needs to comply to the standard. The very first step that we need in our organization is visibility. And it stems from a very simple fact. Can we say how many connected devices we have at our home? We don't really know, right? I mean, it's a tough question to answer. Now, if you think about the same problem for an enterprise, that's an even bigger problem. It's a much bigger problem. So for an enterprise today to say whether I am compliant or not, or whether my devices are compliant or not, whether they are adhered to policy or not, or whether my user knows how to do it or not, the primary question is, what is my enterprise? What is the spread? In this hybrid infrastructure world, we have people working from home, we have people working from offices, we have people working from branches. We have so many different types of people working from different places. We have different types of devices. Are we relying only on laptops and desktops today? No, we have so many different types of devices. And if you look at an enterprise, it's not just the core laptop and desktop. You also have printers, cameras, POS devices. If you look at manufacturing organization, you have devices like OT, IT, and their compliance also matters. Are they compliant? Is an OT device also adhering to policy? Or is it just the IT device? Are we just bothered about laptops and desktops, or we are equally concerned about other important assets that we have in our organization? Now, how do we know about these assets? And that's where the first step comes in, which is visibility. I'm sorry for my voice, but that's visibility. So first we need to have visibility of our environment or visibility of our attack surface. And once we have that, of course, we can leverage the policies which are in line with compliances. And while there are a lot of compliances to take care of, but all of them talk about certain basic things. And what are those basic things? The simple questions like who, what, where, how. Who is connected? What type of device is connected? Where is it connecting in from? How is it connected? These are some basic questions that I'm sure most compliances or any organization would want to know or see in their dashboard. So having the visibility, asking these questions, checking, and after, these questions actually become the part of the assessment. Understand what is your posture. And of course, that would then lead to the further steps of continuous compliance. So two key points that I would want to bring. One is attack surface visibility, which is extremely important. Second, in order to achieve continuous compliance, we need to cover all devices. We can't really be restricted only to IT. We need to think about IT, OT, and everything that we have, because everything needs to comply. Third, we need to ask basic questions: who, what, where, how, those kind of questions. And when you talk about training, I believe from an employee standpoint, if you just train them with some standard training format, it does not really stay in for a long time. The only way to do it is to embed it as a part of everyday life. So if someone is not compliant, he understands he's not compliant. And why is he not compliant? He gets an alert, he gets a notification, he gets a remediation. So when he or she gets that information, that person then understands what I need to do towards getting compliant. And when you learn from experience over a period of time, and that keeps coming in, this becomes very easy, and it becomes a natural training rather than having a classroom training for something like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Subbu sir. And now you have added one more dimension to the what concept have came from both the gentlemen. So the concept is having a visibility of all the connected device. I am just now touching a specific topic or rather subtopic in this larger canvas is the automation. And the question goes to Sridhar. See, we have a hybrid infrastructure which is strategic decision by the organization, right? Then we have a mandatory compliance, which is a necessary, we call it evil or whatever it is. And then question to you, with this two mandatory input, which is not controllable, how the automation part is going to work? Please use the technology and the process design as another variables while giving your answer and suggesting what you have been doing it.
Thank you, Umesh. So just before a small disclaimer, all views expressed here are of my personal opinion and experience, based on my experience. So collating all the inputs from all the panelists here, right? We know the challenges we have heard about, the complex environment, right? The on-prem, public cloud, private cloud, connected devices, end user devices, mobile devices, IT/OT. So all this stuff, right? And the policy frameworks that are put into place, and they are continuously changing specifically to address the regulatory requirements, or it could be even modified because of the threat landscape being changing, right? So in order to do this, the compliance teams have a tough job because they need to ensure that first, these are defined in the policy framework, the policy is put in place, the controls are defined, then the controls are tested. That's very, very important in order to show the regulators that how your policy is effective, how your controls are effective. Have they been tested? And how often they have been tested? So it's not an easy thing. It's a very, very laborious activity, and it's very boring. And moreover, so these are done on a for a periodic time frame, right? So once in a year, once in 2 years, once in 6 months, based on the organization's risk appetite, etc. But does it really help? Because the threat actors out there really cannot wait, saying that, I have tested my control 6 months back, I can just sit back, relax, and I can come back after 6 months. No, right? So maybe, an engineer there who has applied a patch might have gooped up the security configurations of the controls that were put in place, and which might have impacted. So whatever the hardening that you thought was put in place is no more existing, right? So the compliance that you thought was in place was only just point in time. It's no more valid at the moment as we speak, because that's gone, right? So how do we ensure that? Now in today's ever-changing world, a continuous compliance is very, very important. Now, is that really possible? We know the DevOps model, the DevSecOps, right, where the continuous integration and the security is embedded into it. Now, similarly, the continuous compliance is also one of the important aspects that needs to be taken care. You cannot just say that I have tested my controls, I've tested my policies 6 months back, 1 year back, and they are valid today, right? So you need to test this on an ongoing basis. And how do you do this? Do you think that the workforce that you have in your organization is really enough? Probably not, right? Your CISO would say, I don't have budget for that. So then it leads to, we need to kind of think smart. Automation is the only way that actually helps you out. And moreover, even if you have the workforce, say for example, you have the luxury of getting that budget, but do you think that your resources are motivated to the same mundane routine job? May not be, right? So, and that's where the automation actually plays a very key role. And in order to ensure the continuous compliance, automation plays a key role. Now, whether you use tools, you use homegrown tools, you use platforms, you use some scripting languages, it's all up to the individual organization and the budgetary requirements. But the automation is the way forward, and that ensures not just the point-in-time compliance, but also it ensures continuous compliance.
Thank you very much for
I
detailed.
would
Yeah.
just like to add, when you talk about the automation, so I think nowadays when you're talking about millions of attacks happening outside and so many, your organization size is so big and you have so many, systems in place, manually it is not even possible also. The automation is the key. And our industry is very dynamic, is such a, very dynamic in nature. Threats are keep on changing, risks are keep on changing. So I say would add with the continuous the real time monitoring is become very very important, and not real time monitoring but cyber resilience become very important, that how quickly you can respond that incident and threat, that too also on real time basis is become very important. And that's why we are saying when we are choosing a technology should be chosen in such a way that they should be integrated with each other so that they can reply any threat on the real time basis. Like whether you take SOAR or whether you take your firewall, your NAC, most of the technology is like real time integration, so that even the threat intel feed also, which is integrated with all your logs, everything in system, so that they can check real time basis that this kind of malware is present in your systems or not, so that you can quickly respond this kind of attack the real time basis. Those days are gone, doing 1 week or 2 week, just doing the RCA, finding out the RCA where is the exact problem and all.
Thank you for complimenting. I have a, yeah. Please go ahead, then I have a follow-up question ready.
I just missed on the technology piece that you actually mentioned, Umesh. So very, very important thing, how do we actually go about doing this, right? As Subbu said, you need to identify your assets. The visibility is very, very key. That's the first thing. The second thing is defining the policies, as Sumit mentioned. So we need to have the policies. These policies are changing on a continuous basis. So you need to have the policy frameworks, you need to have the controls that are related to the policy framework, you need to have the assets, again, which are collated, and you need to also leverage a lot of these, for example, in the hybrid cloud, hybrid environment infrastructure. We have a lot of these cloud service providers who are providing many tools in order to ensure the compliance of these tools. Either it could be security configurations or it could be compliance requirements. So leveraging those, the cloud service providers, native APIs, etc., could also be a great quick wins, before getting into a large scale automation as well.
Thank you very much. Now my eyes are on the subject and I'm just sticking in my mind which phrase we have touched or we have discussed. So I am touching two things which we need little more insight from your experience, and question goes to Subbu. Process design, that too using a right technology while keeping continuous compliance, and more important, again doing a balance with security and compliance, how we demonstrate that. So keyword here is demonstrate. That is what we have been missing so far. I'm just trying to complete that.
Sure, sure. Thank you. I think I'll just first of all touch upon kind of summarizing the approach, and then I'll talk about how do we demonstrate. So I feel the approach needs to be, if you look at key pillars, the first pillar needs to be identify. Identify what you have. Your attack surface, get visibility, understand them, segregate them. Why am I saying segregation? Because you may be able to achieve continuous compliance on a laptop or a desktop, but not the same case with a PLC or a SCADA. Because if you touch and update a PLC and a SCADA just like that, someone in the factory is not going to allow you to do that, right? So it is important that we know where to focus, and that is why first we identify and classify. So I'm putting that together, identification and classification. The second area is, of course, once you do this, it is the assessment against policy, right? You have your policy in place which says, okay, is this healthy? It is not healthy. this is supposed to have these set of tools, whether does it have those set of tools. So check all of that against the policy. You have a policy, benchmark, test it against that policy. Assess the status of your environment, of your assets. The third, after we do that, we of course would want to respond, right? And when you talk about response just need not be an action all the time. Response can be control, response can be restricted access, response can be blockade completely, response can be just alert, notify. Now depending on the assets that you have, you can choose what response works best in your environment, right? And once you choose one of those responses, then of course we all understand automation is key. Cybersecurity, unfortunately, we don't have luxury of people, right? We are still, everybody wants people, cybersecurity resources. We all have, I'm sure, open hiring tickets. So it is important that we automate. And when I'm saying automate, we cannot automate alone. What I mean by that is there are a lot of investments which each and every company has made in cybersecurity tools. And there are like hundreds of tools out there. And if you have 10 tools, how do we automate alone? We need to automate by orchestrate, by working with your existing tools. So what if you understand that there is a patch missing when you check something? From a compliance perspective, as per policy, this patch is supposed to be there. You understand that patch is missing. Now, can you automate it? Can you automatically trigger a patch management solution to apply a patch? Can you raise a ticket? Right? That is when you actually cover the whole 9 yards. Thankfully, this is doable. And, we as Force Scout have been doing it for quite some time. This can be demonstrated. So where if you look at it, you can start with basic visibility, understand, classify, respond, and even automate. As I said, it's not just Force Scout alone. It can be anybody for that matter. So we need to have an ecosystem. So we need to kind of, from automation perspective, no single vendor can help you. You, of course, need orchestration to make that happen. And from a demonstration point of view, it is extremely important that whatever we do is point in time. I completely agree with everybody here that we are not talking something which was compliant yesterday. We are not talking about, we may have 10,000 assets connected yesterday, we may have 10,300 assets connected today. We may have 7,000 devices compliant yesterday, today we may have 6,000, we don't know. So everything has to be point in time and continuous.
Thank you very much. So I invite Mr. Sumit here. The focus of, I am just building on what Subbu said. Sumit, I request you to focus more on demonstration with automation. But again, the theme stays complex hybrid environment. And scenario is either company in a way to fully migrate to cloud, but they are in middle of the phase. So that means they have a DC, they have a cloud or rather multi-cloud, right? And how they demonstrate, because the taste of pudding is in eating.
I'll take a practical example of what we have done in our organization. I think baseline security is a very important concept, and when you start talking about hybrid, I think from an easy environment, it becomes an extremely complex environment where you're working with end-of-life platforms, you're working with niche platforms being introduced. At the same time, where you have an environment where it's more like a black box, which is the CSPs, and effectively you have very limited or no control on what can be done. And the problem gets exacerbated where the regulatory requirement enforces or mandates you to have basic cyber hygiene. So that's where some of these automated tools that come into play, which are extremely complex when I say the start of it, to ensure that you build the process, and it will touch upon all the aspects of it, is that you build that ecosystem. And as Subbu mentioned, I think there is an orchestration, there is an ecosystem of multiple platforms, multiple products you have. How do you work with your vendor to ensure that whatever they've created works for your environment, but then you work with them to ensure that they then start building other layers of that requirement as well, so that they can incorporate more platforms so you remain automated, right? You should not be in a position where half of the things because that product provides is automated, other half is manual where people are working day in, day out trying to patch things up. So you work with your vendor partner to bring their product also up to the same level by enhancing that platform and introducing more design patterns, something that we have done with one of these vendors. So we have built what we call as secure by design. So effectively, the baseline security is enforced, and if inside a threat, external threat vectors are trying to change the baseline configuration every 15 minutes, it gets enforced again. So that's an example where I would say is all the four aspects has been touched upon where we worked with the vendor partner to bring that product into our ecosystem. We enhance that product so that it works not just with some of our existing on-prem platforms, but also works with be it Azure, be it AWS. They also have effectively same Linux, Windows running in their environment. So how does the CIS benchmark OS baseline can be enforced across your on-prem and cloud providers? Then we worked with them to enforce what we call as secure by design. So it's an automated process. And finally, I think what is most important, the most complex in every organization is, okay, you can throw tons and tons of alerts, you can throw tons and tons of non-compliances. How do you ensure that they are being addressed? Because organizations have only finite set of resources, cannot be always working on fixing things. So that's where secure by design helps, where it enforces the design back onto the platform so that you are not always in a constant fight and constant chasing of people to go and fix the deviations that have been observed. So that's is a practical example of what we have done, and we're kind of on that continuous journey, is to ensure that all of these aspects of what we're discussing is a pertinent topic. That continuous compliance remains enforced. You build that ecosystem, you build the product vendor and bring them and help them enhance their product as well, so that it works a little bit more holistically. You are not, tangling with introducing more and more products and making your environment complex. I think you work with one vendor and you could kind of uplift them as well from a product perspective, and which helps you to uplift your environment as well, so that you remain in a continuous compliance, always automated, and can be demonstrated.
Okay, thank you very much. I am adding little more dimensions with some real world example. The contrast is we as a process driven making policy changes with respect to compliance, but there is a malicious person or a state actor sitting somewhere. He does not have that kind of luxury, or he is not that process oriented. So the question to forum, now I request any panel member to pick this question is, there is a state actor and he is targeting some XYZ organization. But we as a professional have boundaries. When I say boundary means cloud, data center, multi-cloud, then there is a multi-compliance. So when I say multi-compliance, it could be NIST, it could be CIS, it could be GDPR, then it could be CERT-In, and then RBI. Let's say that example. Now, how do you tackle the problem of being agile? I mean, agility comes in picture now, that you have to change the policy, you have to train the people, you have to do testing of the controls. Which way you are demonstrating being agile, that you are complying as well as secure? Should I repeat the question?
So I'll take this. So one way method of doing a lots of simulation kind of exercise is becomes very important. And I'm saying simulation, table type, mock drills, these kind of exercises become very important. And when I'm talking about a red teaming exercise, so real time scenarios, like whether it is on the cloud, whether it is on your on premises solution, private cloud, or your legacy system. And I'm talking about both external as well as internal also. When I'm so Like we have, subscribed to many service provider. Even when we take, any kind of security solution, we make sure that the same security solution should be work in an enterprise manners. Like, they should work in a private cloud, public cloud, and on premises, so that single policy can be enforced everywhere. And when we took simulation exercise from outside also, we make sure that, our SOC, the effectiveness of the SOC, as well as the security compliance system which we have applied, installed at the parameters levels, that is working properly or not. Simple example, like DDoS solution, he is saying it is scatter up to 2 TB. Let's, attack up to 2 TB, whether that box is capable of that 2 TB or not. That testing also which we are, we should need to do it. And similarly for malware attacks or these kind of attacks from your internal system, to find out, how your internal security is, how much it is secured or not. So this is a regular. And then tabletop exercise. Normally in cyber security kind of attack, if you talk about DR is work, in 99% it is not working, because any kind of malware attack or any kind of ransomware attack also, your DR is also not, that too also get impacted. So you should know all these scenarios. Most of the time DR is working only, the infra is not available, primary side. So you need to, whenever you make your policy or cyber crisis management policy, you need to work out all these scenarios, and you need to test it also. See, if these things happen, what I will do it, or you need to break down the structures or everything. Even a small portion also, if this system is not available, how I can achieve this, whether manually. If not possible, let's do it manually with the paperwork which we are working on, 10 years before or 12 years before. But business should not be stopped.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So another input I just add into the earlier bulleted points is doing a testing for your business continuity, doing some tabletop or maybe some simulation. So you want to add up on the same thing, yeah?
I just wanted to add upon, the multiple compliance requirements question that you brought up, right? So if the situation is with me, then probably, it is very difficult for global organizations specifically, right? And healthcare organizations where PI data is there, GDPR becomes very important.
HIPAA and all that.
Yeah, HIPAA and even CIS, NIST benchmarks, etc. So probably the best thing to do is to have a policy framework that is unique to your organization, but complies all of this regulations, right? So you don't have to really go around saying that, okay, I comply to CIS, I comply to NIST, I comply to other things. I have one policy framework which actually meets all of these industry regulations, and then define the controls, right? So I ensure that the controls are compliant. And not only that, and to actually add to ours, if the hacker is actually, or the threat actors are looking at this different regulations, and we are just focusing on the compliance, how do we ensure that we are still secure, right? Compliance from a regulatory standpoint is good, but forgetting the security element and just trying to be compliant really does not help the organization.
Absolutely.
So that's very, very important. Security must be built in, and then compliance is a secondary thing. So, which means to say your policy framework should also embed the security requirements, not only just the compliance requirements. Compliance requirements, ensuring, and again, these needs to be very well mapped to your risk appetite, to your asset types. You just mentioned whether if it's a crown jewel, probably I would ensure that I have a proper ring fenced my infrastructure, right? I have a multi-factor authentication enabled. I have my, encryption in the transit mandated. So these are some of the things that I will only do it for my critical assets. I may not be really required to comply and even have security controls for my business use applications, or maybe, if I have a website where the world can see it, I really do not have to ensure I have put in so stringent controls on that. It's a waste of resources, waste of money, waste of time, everything. So you need to be risk-based as well in this. and ensure that security requirements are built into your policy framework along with your compliance requirements of the regulation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we have few minutes left. I think we can open few questions from the audience.
Great session. You mentioned about DR, you mentioned about business continuity. One aspect we have seen in many of the organizations where incidents have taken place, there is some kind of lack of incident response. You know, whether the time or the policy or the strategy, there is slowness. The media comes to know first, the customers are agitated, and organization is not prepared with that incident response. Suppose something happens, because everything you have mentioned here is how to prevent an attack, but as we know, attacks can still happen. So what do you think? There should be a separate IR policy, incident response policy or strategy, or it should be part of a document which the enterprise has already talked out.
So here I will. So I mean, once we are talking about the tabletop exercise, in tabletop exercise we are also talking about the incident response, how we can respond it. And when I am talking about any crisis management plan or any incident which we are practicing it, it is not only a IT or a cyber security. So stakeholder is like an IT who will, and cyber security, they will do the uptime and real-time forensic and finding out the detail of the incident. But corporate communication handle the media. You know, your finance guy handling a cyber insurance, your law enforcement agency who will talk with the law enforcement agency, who will talk the regulators, who will talk with the certain. So it's a 360-degree approach for any incident. Company like stock exchanges, one single mislead news also hampered everything. You know, your reputation, everything will be stake, though it is a false news also. So when we practice this kind of thing for even the in tabletop exercise where all the stakeholders are involved and their complete SOP is given what they are supposed to do it. So it is a overall organization, not only a given department.
Subbu, you want to add or should?
I
Okay.
completely agree. It is not just an IT problem. You need to have legal teams involved because they'll tell you how to respond to a specific incident, the financial implications, and also there are different types of incidents, right? Not all incidents are common. Sometimes a group of devices would be affected. Sometimes certain amount of data will be lost. Sometimes your entire network is down or your applications are being brought down. So there are different types of incidents and you can't respond to all of them in the same manner. So the number of stakeholders that need to get involved, the process, the tools that you need, they differ based on the incidents. And that is why it is very important that we conduct exercises like this, simulation exercises, and build framework. Okay, these are the various types of incidents that I could potentially have, and categorize them, and then define process to respond to each one of them. Involving all the relevant stakeholders.
Thank you, Subbu. Ma'am, it is an excellent question actually. So my answer to you is that certain directive dated 28th April this year and an FAQ on top of that in the May month. If we see really they wanted 6 things from all the body corporates, CSP or ISP or intermediary. One, they say 180 days log retention. The important where organization are facing challenges, 6 hours after the detection, we have to respond to certain. Now, unless a policy gets created in the company, it cannot be achieved. The reason is very clear. Cyber security also is an employee of the organization. They have a management, and if organization wants to report something, it has to follow certain decision points. there may be a information security council or whatever we call. Unless the policy is in place, this realization is not possible. So that means policy plays a great role, and I would say the has taken a very good step. At least they have come up with something which is mandatory for the body corporates to comply with. I will take now one question because time is limited. Okay, two questions from both of you.
My question is related to the application securities, where we had covered a lot of things related to infra and all the things. But in the application security, where we have challenges like we can't implement sometimes AI or automations and lot of things. How we can cover in the application?
So application security, the OWASP project in itself has come up with many guidelines. Even they have around 300 pages, even secure coding guidelines. Now the question is whether organizations are really ready to invest in or not. Now they have API security. Recently they have come up with CI/CD pipeline security. Even they have mobile security, and even they have penetration test documentation. So OWASP in totality, they cover this topic. Now, specific to AI ML, which is again an evolving field, the time where company has to spend is a design part of it. And there are frameworks available from BSIM, then NIST also gives a framework, and the modeling at design level is the only answer. But the question is whether company has that much time to invest. Are they having a patience? Because everywhere there is a time to market and go to market pressure. So everything has to be balanced out.
I think nowadays DevSecOps is the best answer for this. Not only from designing stage, even business risk, even the the source code risk, the AppSec, everything has to be included from the day one. Every stage of your the modules, or you talk about the stages of your applications, you need to check design aspect, the source code review, the the business logic which you are defining it, everything has to be checked, verified, signed, and then proceed further. Because if you do it from start to last, you'll end up final product somewhere else. So DevSecOps is a very important, and some of the time when you have a legacy system, these things are not even possible. So better to list down all those things and get it approved at least for the residual risk, or what are the timelines when you want to implement, when you are because changing your core system or legacy system, it's a very difficult task.
Yes, please.
I would like to know the view of the panelists on role of infrastructure as a code in ensuring continuous compliance, because it has, I think, high synergy with CI/CD framework also. I think Sumit can appreciate being from business continuity side. So BCDR efforts also, ISE has quite a lot of synergy. So just would like to know the view of the panelists.
I think it's an important question, and thanks for that. And I think as Shiv touched upon, CI/CD is the answer, right? So DevSecOps. So today, no piece of code should be moved into testing phase before it has gone through your secure coding analysis. Tons of tools are available, tons of products are available, whether you are developing in cloud, whether you're developing on-prem. If you integrate it with your pipeline, whether you are an agile organization, whether you're a waterfall organization, whichever methodology you follow, if it is integrated, I think the shift left approach works fantastically. You will be able to identify the security gaps and challenges much ahead. You'll be able to fix faster, and you will be able to truly move into that agile mindset that most of the organizations would like to move in. many products are available that you can integrate in your CI/CD pipeline, and I think that's one aspect of it. Second aspect of it is that there's something called as infrastructure control compliance. So you can build that also, be it a platform or OS standard that you are building in. All of these aspects from an infrastructure control compliance can also be added into your development life cycle, so that when infra teams build the platform, they have the controls integrated into the design, so that you don't fix it every time you are releasing these platform, but effectively at the start of the standard that is built for that particular platform, these controls are built into it, they are certified, and that is when you then put them into the production and give it to your application teams, on which they then run their secure code on it.
Here I would like to add one more thing. Your application should be agile. When you talk about infrastructures, so like in DevSecOps, you have check everything, but infrastructure is very dynamic. Your operating systems keep on changing. Your patches are keep on changing. Sometimes such patches are released which is not compatible with your application also. So it is I can say it is a continuous process, not only a DevSecOps, but it is when you talk about infrastructure, it is a continuous process.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of all panelists, we thank DSI for bringing all of us together in this platform. And excellent initiative. I think it's happening after COVID in presence. Earlier it used to be, I think 2019 was the last it happened. And it has been a great learning with all of us actually. Good questions which probed our mind to answer you. Thanks a lot for opportunity and networking here.
Thank you.